Natural disasters are a part of life, and we have to adjust and adapt to them as best we can. But what we are not able to prepare for is a food-based disaster. And not the kind you might think, like famine or a bad case of food poisoning. Turns out there have been some seriously destructive food disasters over the years. These are the top 8 deadly food-based disasters. Number 8. The London Bear Flood. On October 17, 1814, 320,000 gallons of beer erupted from a massive fermentation tank at the Horseshoe Brewery. The 22 feet high tank held the equivalent of 3,500 barrels of beer. When one of the iron rings on the tank gave way, the whole thing burst and exploded with enough force to destroy the back wall of the building. The neighborhood in which the brewery was located was a slum, where people were packed like sardines in houses that were cheaply made. When the flood hit the streets, it was a 15 feet high wave picking up all the garbage from the street. 2 houses had collapsed when the wave hit, and by the time the brew had subsided, 8 people in total had died. There was at least one unconfirmed report of a 9th death from alcohol poisoning of someone drinking from the river of beer. Before we continue, please subscribe to Rite Entertainment for more informative videos such as this one. Please watch to the end, you will be surprised. Number 7. Poison grain disaster. In 1971, there was a serious drought affecting Iraq and much of the Middle East. Iraq brokered a deal with Mexico for a high-yielding wheat that the Mexican government had developed, expecting that it might be able to grow in the desert climate. They purchased 0.1 million tons of it and had it shipped across the ocean. Because of the long voyage, they treated the wheat with a fungicide made from mercury to prevent it from germinating. Mercury is a toxic substance that should not be consumed. The wheat was supposed to be planted and treated with the fungicide, which would not contaminate it as it grew, but it arrived too late to be planted. Farmers were warned not to consume it. Instead, they fed it to their livestock and made bread and other foods, not trusting the warning. Within weeks, thousands were hospitalized with mercury poisoning. There was a government recall, but by this, farmers had thrown them out, which had polluted the environment, including rivers. By the end, it was an ecological disaster, which resulted in 459 people dead, while thousands more suffered permanent brain damage. Number 6. Washburn Mill Explosion. In 1878, Minneapolis was home to the largest flour mill in the entire world. The Washburn Mill was making 2,000 barrels of flour every single day. While most are concerned with the machinery being dangerous, given there were a few accidents mechanically, the biggest issue was the dust produced by the flour itself. Any sparks in the building could cause the extremely fine particles to ignite. When a pair of millstones overheated and started shooting off sparks on May 2nd, 1878, dust in the chimney flues caught on fire, which created a massive buildup of pressure. Essentially, the entire building became a bomb. The explosion was heard 10 miles away. 14 workers died, and the fire created burned down every building in the area, taking out 5 other mills. Number 5. Douglas Starch Works Explosion. In 1919, the destructive force of tiny particles of cornstarch floating in the air was so powerful that it blew out windows all the way across the town of Cedar Rapids. Houses shook as if an earthquake had hit. In total, 43 workers at the starch plant died, Walls of the factory were blown out completely and 30 more people injured. So powerful was the blast that on the other side of the river, a child was blown backwards off a couch and died. 200 homes across Cedar Rapids were damaged. The cause? A small fire had ignited, causing the cornstarch particles to ignite and rapidly expand into a massive explosion. Number 4. Imperial Foods Fire. In 1991, the Imperial Foods chicken processing plant in North Carolina experienced a catastrophic accident. A hydraulic line ruptured right above a fryer. The plant was filled with smoke and flames almost immediately. 90 people were working in the plant at the time the fire started, and they should have all been able to escape, but did not. The reason? The fire exits had all been chained shut from the outside. It turns out that the owner of the plant, Emmett J. Rowe, had ordered all the doors locked from the outside to prevent employees from stealing chicken. In total, 25 workers died in the fire and another 56 were injured. Number 3. The Dublin Whiskey Fire. A flood of booze can be dangerous, as we've seen. With a high alcohol content, a flood could potentially be flammable as well. In Dublin, Ireland in 1875, a flood of flaming whiskey blazed its way through the town. Reed's Malt House and Malone's bonded warehouse caught on fire. Between the two of them, they housed 2,000 pounds worth of malt liquor and around $900,000 of whiskey. The booze ignited and flooded through the streets, sending everyone into panic. Firefighters couldn't use water to put out the fire in fear of exacerbating the problem. Instead, they had to use sand and manure to try block the path of the flow. Inexplicably, no one died, but there were some casualties of a few people trying to drink the whiskey despite the fact that it was still on fire. Number 2. Lucknow Ketchup Disaster. 6 workers met an untimely end at the Akanksha food products plant when they were exposed to the fumes produced by fermenting ketchup. The first victim had entered the massive ketchup fermentation vat with the intention of cleaning the old vegetable pulp. However, the fumes produced by the vegetation overwhelmed her and caused her to fall unconscious. She eventually died from suffocation, and 5 other co-workers went to her aid, but each one suffered the same fate. Number 1. The Imperial Sugar Explosion. If you've ever burned yourself with anything made of sugar, you know just how painful this can be. It burns hot and it sticks, which makes it extra dangerous. And that's part of the reason the explosion at the Imperial Sugar Factory in Port Wentworth, Georgia, was so absolutely nightmarish. First responders reported seeing victims who had their skin completely burned off, and others of whom it was dripping. 14 people died, 40 more injured, and another 17 were placed in medically induced coma due to severe injuries. The cause of the disaster was dust in the air. Sugary dust ignited by faulty equipment and lack of safety protocols led to the massive explosion. The fire burned for more than 7 days because the molten sugar is nearly impossible to extinguish. Thank you for watching. Bye!